Hi, everyone. Tonight is Monday, January 8th, 2018. This is the Westwood Board of Selectmen meeting in the new police station. We will begin, as we always do, with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll grant permission to Westcat to audio and videotape tonight's proceeding. Anybody else wish to audio tape or videotape? Okay, hearing none. Chairman's update. Just want to give some thanks to all of those who worked during last week's storm, our DPW crews and our contractors and police and fire folks who did a lot to keep us safe and secure. We appreciate all of their efforts. We're going to, before we go to scheduled action, is there anybody here from Del Frisco's?
No, it's off the agenda.
Oh, it's off.
It's off.
Oh, sorry.
Update.
Okay, I just didn't want to make them wait if they were here. Okay, so we're going to go right to financial update. Hi, Pam.
How are you? Happy New Year, everyone.
You tell us how we're doing.
Great, doing good. We're in the thick of the budget season, and so I just wanted to give you an update on kind of where we are, what's happening, and what else is left to do for the rest of the month. So first, just to update the board that we have been out there meeting with all of our various groups. We've been into the school committee, the budget steering committee. We've been meeting regularly with them since the fall, and we've been into the long-range financial planning committee. So we're making sure that our information is out there to everyone, that our financial information is clear, that everyone knows what we're trying to focus on for this budget. And as always, we like to put the scale to remind people that we're trying to address many areas in the budget each year. But we've had some great discussions with our groups. And some of the material that we've been reviewing with them, we've just tried to itemize here. We've gone through the FY19, our budget projections, both the revenue and expenditures. We have really tried to make sure people understand University Station, how much revenue has come in from the project, how we've spent it, where we stand with the meals tax, how that's been tracking, and then giving people information about the next phase of the development. We've also spent some time talking about real estate taxes. We went through with our groups. We just issued our actual tax bill that went out January 1, so we've kind of gone through and talked with people about what happened with that bill, what happened with our commercial residential tax rates and our tax split. And we did what we've had since we've last been into you. We've talked with people about the impact of the new federal tax laws. As the board is aware, we had hundreds and hundreds of our residents came in the last week of the calendar year to prepay their tax bills. I think I saw many of you or your spouses, and really something we're going to have to talk about as this goes further along and people kind of get more information about the new federal laws. But we had a lot of our residents coming in. We're set up to take prepayments, and I do want to recognize both the collector's staff and the treasurer's staff who really went all out to make sure that it was kind of a smooth, quick process for people.
Do you roughly how many people actually did it? Any idea?
Actually paid. I think we had well over 1,000. Either coming in, paying online, mailing it. You could put it in our regular mail or in that slot we have out front of Town Hall. We had people come who had never been into Town Hall before, so we worked hard to make sure they got a good impression and that we were able to be helpful to them. But really just people, and we tried to be helpful. People were, panicked a little bit, watching the news and seeing what was happening. But
it's interesting that they're rushing to pay us.
Rushing to pay. I do have to say, typically where our conversations this time of year might be talking about the tax bill and what's happening, it was much more like, how can I pay you? And,
Well.
Yeah. And we, can always take the money. We tried to clarify. Some people said, oh, this is a big bonus for the town. And it's not really. We're not going to have any extra revenue.
Right.
It's just coming in sooner. So we tried to be as helpful to people as we could. We worked with people, then would send them home. They would talk to their accountant or their spouse and come back. We even indicated if you change your mind next week, we're happy to kind of refund. We know people are just trying to do the best they can. So it was a lot of activity, and again, I think we'll be talking more about that later on in calendar 18. And then finally, we've been reviewing with people the capital projects. The schools had announced that they got into the first phase of the MSBA program, which is excellent news. There will be a town meeting article for them to begin that first phase of the school building project. So we've been talking with our groups about what that means. And how that fits in. This is really the first phase for the schools, but we want the community to be receptive to that and make sure they understand that you know, the actual major funding wouldn't come for a couple of years down the line, but that we would be gearing up for that. So we have been trying to, in some ways, let that set the tone for this year's budget, have that be our centerpiece item, and then have a quieter year in some other areas of the budget so that the public can focus on that that project. It's great news and big news for the town.
And Pam, some of this, the school building project, though, we're gonna use some of the tax, the meals money that's been accruing. Are we gonna
So,
take some of that?
This first phase that they would need at this year's town meeting, and they're still clarifying how much that would be, but we would issue that as a borrowing article, and then we would run that for a couple of years as just a short-term borrowing. So we wouldn't really have to pay out a lot, just interest only. And then if the major project goes forward, we can then roll this into that. We would be issuing a long-term bond to pay for the larger project. But the short-term interest, yes, we will pay out of university station revenue, so it will not impact other areas of the budget. And this is just the first piece to get them going. Now they do all their planning and design, and they have to do extensive work with MSBA. But this is really great news for the town that they were invited in this phase. It gives some clarity to our overall capital planning, both on the municipal side and the schools. And so as part of that process, we continue to talk about the future municipal building needs, review our debt schedules. You know, we do think we'll have some nice overlap of when the schools are ready to go out with the bond, that we'll be ending our payment on the high school bond. So we're trying to lay that out for people now. So we've been meeting a lot with various groups. And then just to remind the board where we are on our revenue estimates for FY19, you know, our main revenue source taxes, the total increase from one year to the next, from 18 to FY19 budget, is about 3.1 million in tax revenue. That's utilizing our full levy capacity, except for the university station new money. But other than that, that's the full levy, 3.1 million. Right now, level funding only for state aid. We will, a week from Friday is the MMA meeting, and the governor always gives us a preview at that meeting on what to expect for state aid. So we'll have more on that before your next meeting at the end of the month. And then with the university station money, there's about $500,000 that would be under consideration for the FY19 budget, coming in part from what we did not use in the current year, 279,000, and then an estimate of new growth for 19, about 200,000. So having 3.1 million to work with in revenue is pretty standard for us, consistent when we look at our long-range forecast. This is just a quick look at that tax levy. So we've been going through this with some of our groups to make sure people understand. Prop 2.5 is very formula specific on how our levy changes each year. So the column on the right shows what we're budgeting for FY19. Our levy begins with the prior year. We can then increase by 2.5. So for us, that's 1.8 million. An estimate of new growth, non-university station, 450,000. And if you run on that line with the 450 to the left, you can see that for the last several years, we've exceeded that. We use a very conservative budget estimate of new growth. So we're using 450. Last year, that was 1.2 million, the year before 1 million. So we do expect at the end of our process that number would change, but for budgeting purposes, we use this. 200,000 for the university station. The line in blue is the exempt debt, 1.4 million. That's for any projects approved outside 2.5. That's currently just the library and the high school. And the high school does end. We're in our final 5 payments for that high school bond, which was a 20-year bond. So that's just terrific news. And the fact that the school still looks beautiful and new this late in the bond is wonderful.
Pam, question for you on new growth that came from Route 1, the auto dealerships. Did we capture all that new growth? Was the timing such that it was at full value?
Yes, so in the FY18 column, that new growth of 1.2 million included the auto dealerships.
Right.
All of it. They had started the year before.
Yeah, that's why I'm
And weren't
asking.
captured, they were captured in this FY18, yes.
Okay.
The University Station was low in FY18, 179,000 in new tax revenue. We did not capture in that year with the state's timing requirements, the hotel, the Del Frisco's restaurant. Those will all come in the FY19.
But Del Frisco's will only be at its construction value, January 1, right? It's as of last week.
So for new growth, you can take what is there through June 30th.
That's
So
right.
for the 19 budget, it will be
Okay.
what is there next June
So they'll
30th,
be open.
18.
So they'll be open.
They should be open and up and running, and the hotel also. Just two things to point out on the bottom of that slide. We've not had a general override in more than 10 years. And I think that's really outstanding for the town, and that the selectmen have been able to do as much as they've been able to do as far as services for the town without a general override. And again, the exempt debt, we just have the two pieces running, and the high school ends in another 5-year period. We had looked at your last meeting at the fixed cost. That's one area we have to address with our new revenue before moving on to other areas of the budget. Our total fixed cost budget, 13.5 million currently. Our current estimate is about a 9% increase to that, or 1.2 million, based on our pension assessments, our health insurance, and other fixed costs. That health insurance is an estimate at this point, 6%, and we'll know those actual amounts in March. So that's a slide we'll update later in the process. And then looking at our overall budget summary, our preliminary plan had looked to outline a 3% increase for operating budgets for school and municipal. So a 3% increase would cost about 1.89 million, and is what we would have under our funding scenario. The chart at the bottom shows a couple-year history of what we've been able to do in the operating budgets. And while we did have FY16 and 17, we were able to do a little bit beyond our normal because of University Station funding. We're now kind of back to our more sustainable growth level, which is much closer to the 3%. I will indicate, and will mention that the school superintendent has released her FY19 school budget request, and we'll be presenting that to the school committee on Thursday night. And her budget, which is her initial budget as superintendent, is within our 3% target frame. So that's excellent news, and it is that's a hard task to put together the budget for the schools, particularly your first one, and she's really worked hard at that. And that's great for our overall budget process, that is coming in line with our budget estimates.
And I just want to mention, when we were at the meeting back in December, she was previewing a lot of the parameters for the school budget, and I believe proposing that the kindergarten fee be lowered over a 3-year period, so
Right.
1/3 of it would go away in next year's budget. Do you know if that's what she's proceeded with?
There's definitely a phase out.
Okay.
I only saw the document quickly today. I
Okay.
will have more
Yeah, that was the
information for
plan at
you.
budget steering, so we'll have to
Yeah.
confirm that.
It looked like it
was
might
gonna
have
go
been a-
600, 600, 600.
And the other thing I want to say that's great is that she's releasing the budget essentially the first week in January, second week in January, or whatever you want to call it, and not late January. And I think it gives everybody more time to review it. The school committee, finance commission, that's great too. So, I mean, not only is she presenting a budget that she feels is a good budget and somewhat close to the parameters we set, but doing so in a very timely manner, which is great for all involved. So I think
And I
that's
will
good
say, I mean,
news.
I think the, for my first time through, the budget steering process was great. I hope it's something we can all replicate in years to come. We started talking in September, so it was, I
That's
think that was really
good.
good to start talking early.
Yes, and, early in the year, we can give our general parameters and talk
Right.
about that overall process. As you said, the superintendent at that last meeting kind of previewed a lot of the things in the budget for the school committee, so they know what's coming. We happened to be at that school committee that night and went through some of this material with them, and so they, kind of know what's
Right.
going to fit in the overall process, so it does feel,
Yeah.
really terrific that that's come out.
Yeah, it was a good outcome.
Yep. And just to point out quickly, the other areas in the budget beyond the 3% operating, that our capital budget will be at that higher level that we've been doing the last couple of years, the 1.7 million for school and municipal capital. Just moving down the slide, we'll continue with just our $100,000 transfer into the stabilization fund, keeps us on target with that. The budget will include a 1.4 million appropriation to the OPEB trust, keeps us right on target with that. We will have that supplemental capital budget article, again, as we've done the last 2-3 years, maybe 4 years. So there'll be some additional items we'll be able to get to, both using the free cash and perhaps the meals tax. In talking with our various groups, they would like to see some of that meals tax applied to some items in the budget this year. And so this capital article is one place that we can do so.
But I do think we do need at some point to figure out what it's going to serve, right? We've accrued about 800,000 in that right now. So I just think long-term, it can't start going into operating budgets,
Yep.
right? But it's got to fund a specific,
Yep.
or multiple specific reasons.
Yes, so
So-
if here we use it in the capital budget, that'll be the first time people see that, and that goes very specifically to a project. So people will say, okay, I know that this funded this project. And that's been a terrific revenue source for us, coming, from the University Station project, the restaurants down there. Coming, a lot of it from people outside of town eating at those
Right,
restaurants.
right.
Certainly our residents are eating there too, but, our residents have been doing that for a long time in other communities over in Dedham and Norwood, and this will be nice.
When that hotel goes online in Del Frisco's, we're going to see some nice bumps.
Yes, so the last quarter just came in December 30th, and that was $95,000. So we've been consistently now at that level.
We're at 400 a year.
About 400 a year. So that should improve, and gives us enough to work with to utilize that and still have room that, we want to make sure we accommodate any fluctuations that could happen with that in the economy. But at that level, we will have space to do that. And then one item that we've talked about with some of our groups, that aid to the elderly tax relief, that, perhaps this is the year that we should take a portion of the meals tax to look to match the donations that came in. We're not talking about a lot of money. We're talking in the $25,000 to $30,000 range. But perhaps this is the year that we would add that.
Yeah, I agree.
The municipal budget, we're still working on, and so we don't really have more on that for you tonight. We're going to continue on that until your meeting at the end of the month. We had talked before that initial budget request came in about a 4.7% increase, and then some, beyond that, some additional requests for new positions. So that does put us out of target and a bit higher than we want to be for this year's operating budget. So we're going to continue to work on that to kind of bring that more in line. And Mike and I have had discussions about what we can do with some of the requests and work with our department heads to try to make sure that we can streamline that.
I think it's really important that be at 3%, and we're not much higher.
Yep, and we want to point out that the board has done a terrific job over the last couple of years in being able to, over time, incrementally supplement staffing in some major areas in the municipal budget. So since FY13, over a 5-year period, we've really, the board's done a really nice job in getting to some staffing needs that the town had. So our fire staffing, we've been able to add 12 positions, police 6 positions. In the DPW, we added some positions not only to the operations area, but been able to build up a little building maintenance department. And then other areas of our budget also, community and economic development, council on aging, and general admin. So we've done a lot over the last couple of years, and FY19 may be a pause year where we're kind of just trying to have a streamlined budget request for FY19. And then we'd be continuing to look again in future years, again, at staffing needs and as more of University Station comes online.
I think we had a great year. I think we opened a police station, a fire station, we had a groundbreaking for a water treatment plant. I think a year of stability, when people are gonna see some significant tax increases, property tax increases, might be a good thing.
Yeah.
My only question though, Pam, is, and I don't, this ties in a little bit to the Brigham, Mike, but are we looking to do anything on the Council on Aging building this year? Is that a
They've gone
question?
forward with the repair, the monies, that the 300,000
Yeah.
that was given has already is being expended as we
It
speak.
is, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, if you take a close look, I walked one, but it looks beautiful.
Oh, okay, the exterior too, some of
Yes,
that, okay, good.
beautiful. It's
I have been up
night
there
and
a couple
day
months.
from where it was,
Okay, good.
and they did a very impressive job.
Good.
It
Is there
really
anything
looks
left to do,
terrific.
Mike?
I'm not certain, I haven't heard that it's
They did the
completed,
roof, they did the
but,
side, all the siding and paint.
HVAC, I think, was still left.
Still left to do. The
Some of the
inside.
exterior wood was.
Heating and
exterior is
HVAC.
done.
And
Oh,
that
good.
was not painted, not clapboard, it was whatever siding, I think, this time.
Good.
It looks
Good.
really terrific.
Oh, good, okay.
Yes.
But question for you, Mike, design money for expansion, were we going to do something about that going forward?
We're hoping to, yeah.
So that was funded, 40,000 was funded in the budget
Mm.
last May, but that has not gone forward yet.
Okay.
They kind of did the repair.
we have
works.
that, okay,
They have
good.
that for their next phase.
Good.
But it really looks beautiful, really enhanced that building. So we will continue to work with our departments on the municipal budget and bring you that back at the end of the month.
Pam, I think the only, I agree with everything you say. The part-time library position for youth services, I think that has been spoken about so many times. On the request for new positions?
Yes.
Was that the position they've been talking about when all the kids come in after
Yes.
school and?
So I do think that's ready to go.
I do too.
The library last year came into the board and talked about that, and we all know, we see the kids coming down on the short Wednesday, hundreds of kids. It's a great
Been in
thing in
there.
town, the middle school kids get their snack, they go to the library, and they are welcoming them, they want the kids, they'd like to do more than just kind of, they'd like to get them into some programs. So they did, what the board asked was try some different things.
Mhm.
They've got a high school mentoring program where they have some high school staff come and kind of help volunteer and keep
Good.
the kids engaged. But they do feel now, and the library commissioners would like to have, and they'll start on a part-time basis. So the request is about $23,000 to implement that. And it does seem that that is something that should be
Yeah,
ready.
no,
Sounds
I
like a
agree.
good
Yeah.
investment.
Yeah. Okay.
So we will, as we work on the budget, incorporate that. The COA admin is a similar small request from a part-time to full-time as they expand and do more programs. That would be helpful for them. So we're going to look to incorporate that also into the budget. So we will continue on the next several weeks with more meetings with our various groups. We have some lined up. We'll be getting the municipal budget back to you, but the goal is to kind of get that down closer to that 3% target. We'll also start to lay out the specific items for the capital budget articles to go forward, but we're at that higher level, and then the extra capital. We'll get our state aid number next Friday, so we'll know about that. And then just our deadlines, after your meeting of the 30th, the next couple of days, we issue our budget books out, and then we do present that to the FinCom on February 6th at their meeting. So we're in good shape with some more work to do over the
Yep.
next couple of weeks, but we're moving
Yeah,
along
no, this is
fine
great. Thank you
in
for
the
doing that.
process. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Marie.
Thanks, Pam. Okay, next on our agenda, University Station Phase 2 Development Agreement. Mr. Bailey, Ms. Locknane, join us. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you for the write-up. It was very helpful.
Yes. Dan for that. He provided the
Well,
write-up.
there was plenty of input from others.
I'm sure you edited it.
She pointed out all the mistakes, like she usually does.
It
But
was helpful,
in-
yes.
In fairness, one of the mistakes was in the consultant's report, regarding the number of school-age children. There are actually 33, I think I put.
I was wondering
29.
about that.
Right, they weren't quite up to date.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too, I mean, it's always an interesting number for me because we know that so many of those kids were already in the system. So I think even, it's still far below any of the projections.
It's actually fairly in line with our consultant's projection, which was between 49 and 63 units for the 350 phase. It's not that much lower than that one. We're at 33 now. We could go a little bit higher than that. We're figuring it's going to be 0.1 child per unit,
Mm-hmm.
which is above what their consultant had proposed. He had thought that there would be 55 children out of 650 units. We're probably expecting, if we eventually got to 650
Yeah.
units, we'd expect to see more along the
But
lines
that's
of
a blended
65
number. It's
students.
lower for the one-bedroom, higher for the two.
Yes, yes.
And what's, the 33 aligns with what level of occupancy? Did they have
33
it?
is with 321 of the 350 units occupied, so I think that's about 92%. So we're expecting to see approximately 35 children when the building is full.
All right, so phase one is done, right? We can say goodbye. Phase two is an application for 100 condominium, 2 buildings,
Correct.
correct? And tell me, where are we talking? If I'm looking at the existing gables, to the right?
It would be,
Across the
no,
street.
across the street.
Okay.
If you're looking at Bridges
Yeah.
Assisted Care Facility, it would be on the left-hand side of that access road that takes you to Bridges,
Okay.
up against the train tracks, so between Bridges and the new Brigham and Women's Building.
Okay. I have a bunch of questions. I don't know if you wanted to say something first, or do you want me to just go by what you wrote up? I think for me, after reading this, what I just think is so critical, Dan, is this question around the units at Bridges and whether or not they contribute to our 10% requirement. I mean, can we ask for an opinion? Can we?
We're working on that, yeah. My colleague Gareth Orsmond, who did all of the legal work on the Gables affordable housing, and that's his expertise, is affordable housing. He's had a couple conversations with DHCD. I don't know if you've had conversations. It's a complicated issue. Because they've taken a position in the past in Hingham on a very large assisted living type project that not only did they all count, none of them were affordable. And that was contrary to a letter that DHCD had sent to the town of Hingham several years beforehand. So it's a kind of a hot potato, and it's hard to get an answer.
So we should go with the assumption that none of the bridges will contribute.
I think that's a safe assumption.
That's the safe assumption.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that was one of the things that jumped out at me when I was going back through this.
Right.
Because we had been very careful, both in the development agreement and in the bylaw, to say that if those units were in fact, regular market units in the denominator, then they had to provide 10% affordable units. But when those were developed, the rule was different than maybe what the rule is now. And, there was nothing hard and fast on it. So there are no affordable units as part of the Bridges facility.
So has the DHCD actually ruled in opposite to what that letter in Hingham said? Have they actually mandated that they all be counted in the?
Yeah,
On what
Hingham litigated
basis?
that.
On what basis are they doing the backsies and saying, well, what we said before is no longer the case? Do we have any idea?
I will try to answer it accurately.
Okay, go
At one
for it.
point I could, because I was up to speed and I'd read all the materials. What they basically said is, well, what we told you before was never binding. This is a very unique structure. It's kind of like a Fox Hill structure, where you buy in and
Co-op type.
it's complicated, and they ultimately, when push came to shove, and what happened was a developer came along and challenged it. Hingham said, "Oh, we're at 10%. We've got these 1,000 units."
So they've got that pressure.
And so,
coming at them.
so a developer challenged it, and it went into court, and ultimately,
Going through the
it
courts.
did go through the courts, yeah.
Got it. That helps.
So of all the
Yeah,
mitigation that we need from New England Development, it's this issue.
I think this is
The
probably
issue.
one of the biggest issues. we
Yeah,
have.
there's a net 7 units, there.
And our concerns are amplified because we have other units in town besides those units
Right.
there. So if
Right.
any assisted living units count, and they all count, then that
Only makes
puts
the
us further
hurdle
behind
greater
it.
for us.
And what are the chances, do you think, in this application for this new development, that they would go, essentially, if it's 100 units, that they'd go to 17% versus 10%?
With condominium units, I don't think that's likely. I think they would propose some alternate arrangement to provide affordable units elsewhere in town. And it may be elsewhere in the development,
I mean,
or
a
it may be.
linkage
Right, that's what I was gonna
Convert
say.
some of the beds in
Right,
the facility to.
to affordable units. right.
Yeah, all of those are difficult options.
Right.
Because the facility's already done, and that's owned by somebody independent now. Okay,
It is.
the same thing, I mean, the developer really, well, they don't own anything anymore, they still manage the retail, they own some of the land. But, what you would hear from them even with their condo deal, which is, we're not really doing the condos, we're selling that property. And,
They've already underwritten it.
yeah, it's all underwritten, it's all approved, and, as Nora said, affordability and condos don't go together as well as affordability and multifamily. Because in multifamily, if you do 25%, you can count them all, just like we did with Gables. The economics of it are, in condos, are really challenging. I mean, I do a fair amount of it, inclusionary zoning, particularly in the city, and we are always trying to find an off-site location to meet the affordability requirements.
So Dan, is there any litigation pending to force the DHCD to make a decision one way or another?
Not to my knowledge.
I mean, it seems to me that someone has to force their hand and say, make a decision. And we need to really almost have that before we come up with a development agreement. I mean, it just seems to me that someone's got to force it, and maybe perhaps it's us, to say, hey.
No, it's, the decision's gonna be made in 2020, because they'll be determining in 2020 what the denominator will be, and it'll either be included or not included. in
Yeah, but we
2020.
don't want to be in that boat.
No,
I
we have to, that's why
understand,
we
but
have to assume.
that's when they get forced to make the decision. They're gonna have to figure out, I mean, we have at risk at another location, which is Fox Hill Village, with the white, what's it called, white?
White Oak
White Oak
Cottages.
Cottages.
Same, it's the same thing.
So we have to proceed,
With the assumption,
16 of them, though.
we have to
Yeah, 12.
proceed that we've got to come up with more affordable units
Mm-hmm.
and give us more cushion. If it goes in our favor, great, but we can't assume that it will go in our favor, so we have to find other alternatives
It's
to
really kind of a systemic issue.
protect us.
and will they work with, I mean, I would think it would be in their favor that we're not in a place where someone could come in and make a dense development under 40B, right? I would think they would
Well-
want to prevent that as well.
Who?
NED.
NED.
No,
Don't care.
they don't care.
Yeah, they don't.
Why would they care? I could see a developer forcing the issue,
Yeah, that's exactly right.
and like forcing it
Not in
before
our favor, though.
2020.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what, I mean, do we think they'd be willing to entertain a discussion with us?
Well,
To help?
I think we're in a position where that discussion is necessary. In order to go before
Right.
the planning board with the project development review and the special permit, there needs to be a decision on whether the existing project is adequately mitigated. And if there are
It's not.
a shortage of 7
Right, it's
units,
not.
then it's not. And that has to be satisfied before the planning board can grant its approvals.
So do we take a vote? I mean, what, are you looking for what the flavor of the board is? mean,
I
what-
think, I think we're looking for these different aspects of the development agreement that we're recommending you should consider amending to determine if you agree
Yeah,
with
let
all
me-
of them, if there are any of these that you don't think are worth pursuing.
Well, honestly, to me, I mean, the building permit fees and the school mitigation, I think are like small potatoes in the big discussion, right? I think,
The bill,
The
building
building
permit
permit
fees.
Building
Could be
fees are
pretty
a big-
significant money.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
significant.
We're saying we don't need to go further with the school mitigation.
right.
I think that's the
think
case.
that's fine.
Yeah.
We're
I think that-
adequately
I think
mitigated.
we all agree
But
on
to-
that.
The tower, they should put up.
The
sort of
radio
communication.
communications.
absolutely.
Well, I think that's what I wanted to ask. I believe that we have the resources already. Pam, we were talking about this a little bit, the communication tower that the public safety departments need on University Avenue. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it, but if we already have resources from University Station that could cover it, I'd rather focus on their attention, the developer's attention on this housing thing.
Right.
And not on other things that we might be able to handle. I mean, this housing thing is a very, very important issue for us. Long-term issue. If
Is
we
there-
can
is-
address some of the things.
Is there existing mitigation money that could handle the communications issue?
Yes, from the Phase 1 municipal mitigation money, the selectmen would vote that over to public safety things, primarily starting the staffing increase that we looked at earlier. But there is still a piece remaining that has not been used, that you could use. It would just be a selectmen's vote to use that money, that you could use to do the tower if you wanted to do that right away.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with where you were going with that. I mean, I think if we can resolve all these other pieces, I just think it's number 4 on your write-up that is the issue.
And do we have separate money still for the Canton Street mitigation, for traffic study?
No, that's all been
Well,
expended.
Well, we have
Well, the way
the
this
traffic
reads-
study mitigation.
That's
money.
separate, that's not
Yeah.
the
That's what I'm
traffic
talking
calming,
about.
right, yes. We have
That's what, the 250.
intersection, yes. We have, of the 250,000, I think we have about 190,000 left.
Yeah, and the issue there, we did have Beta look at that probably a couple of years ago now. That's where some of the money was spent. And the conclusion was really, well, you really can't evaluate it until the slip ramp is in and you know, I mean, you want to go down and evaluate it right now, it's a mess. You know,
Yeah.
because they're under
You
construction.
wouldn't want to do it now.
So, you know, because Mike, Nora, and I talked about this the other day, too. You know, you have an option that's good for another 14 years on a big piece of land between Harvard Street
That's
and
good.
Canton Street. You know, should you need it to mitigate impacts from that intersection. I guess being a real estate lawyer, I'm always looking for ways to monetize things like options. But, you know, it's just not time.
Should we extend that option with them, just because time is going and it's not ready, and just since we're going to be talking to them about things?
We've got a long time.
14
I mean,
years
we've
is a
got
long
14 more
time.
years. I mean, it's
My
been-
point is, now is the time we're talking to them about things. It's not like, you know, this is a door that's open to have more discussions. It's just we've been using up time that's still not finished. I agree, 14 years is a long time. I just didn't know if it's worth extending it for any reason. If you don't think so, it's fine.
If we're not in a position within 2 years after that slip ramp opens.
Do you think we could bring it up independently
Sure.
of this discussion?
Sure, you can bring it up anytime.
Anytime there's a project development review, so
Yeah.
whatever the next building is that they're
That's what I was saying.
willing to
yeah.
propose, that would be the time for
Okay.
another
Okay.
review.
The other thing is, instead of just trying to extend the time, maybe extend the purposes to which that land could be put. We had talked about a public safety facility, if it ever were to go in that location, this would be a possible location. We weren't able to add this
Hmm,
to development.
That's a good
We
point.
might be talking about public safety and affordable housing on this strip of land, so.
It's a tough piece of land. A lot of,
Yeah,
you know,
just-
yeah,
we're
a
gonna
lot
have
of
to
grade
do
changes.
Grade
Yeah.
condos all the way down, like
That's
almost
exactly what.
stacked.
That's
Yes.
the one thing that
I remember
has
that.
been proposed that was maybe viable.
Right, I remember that. It'd have to be almost like a staircase kind of buildings.
Yeah.
40,000 square foot office building that was
proposed.
planned,
Right.
but I think it was approved by the planning board.
Are we
or at least
limited
the
as to what
planning
we
board.
can buy the land for? This isn't clear.
Yeah. Is
The-
it-
the
is it
option.
price lock in, or is it?
No, it's free.
It's free.
Okay, The
Okay.
land is free, but it's for purposes of traffic mitigation.
Okay.
To Mike's point, maybe we can get
Mhm.
some flexibility.
But so I would say that as you go forward, it is this affordable housing piece and whatever mitigation we can get in this process. I don't think the process as presented to us this evening is properly mitigated, if that's the ultimate question. I don't know if my colleagues agree or disagree, but.
And we have, and we provided it, the consultants, the developers' fiscal report. We do not yet have the peer review report.
Right.
That's being worked on. And Craig Seymour, who's doing that, will be talking with the various department heads. I don't know how much the consultants, developers consultant, talked to the department heads. I know he talked to Pam.
Yeah, none of that study is very heavy lifting. It's information in and then
Well,
some number crunching and.
And the development agreement says that for phase 2, for the special permit, the developer has to evaluate the impacts of the housing in phase 1. Doesn't specifically talk about overall fiscal impacts. That we pick up in the zoning bylaw. So I think because of the language of the development agreement, he was really focused on the housing.
And it will be in phase 2.
And the review by the planning board of the condominium proposal starts when? Is it tomorrow?
Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at the Downey School.
And I think there's an unstated or fiscal mitigation, fiscal issue that we need to consider, and it is that we develop this affordable, this housing in advance of any further development of commercial. The balance in the development is off.
Correct.
That's number one. Number two is that increasing property values on the residential side and not equally on the commercial side will cause an imbalance in the split tax rate. And we don't have any room left to move. We're at 1.70, I believe, this year, right? So there's not, like the last time we had this, when University Station went forward the first time and the housing preceded the commercial, we had that imbalance, but we had some room to move that year. We took it then and we never gave it back. We never got that room back.
So prior to the master development plan modification, I guess last spring, we took a look at the phases of the project and how they were balanced. We're looking for the overall project and each individual phase to be 67% commercial, 33% residential. And in the first phase, we didn't meet that point. In the second phase, we were hoping to. One of the reasons that the developer was willing to only have 100 condos in the second phase of development, rather than up to 300 that are permitted under the bylaw by special permit, was to keep us within that balance. We achieved that balance for the master development plan modification because the phase 2 didn't just involve these condos, but involved commercial development as well. The Brigham's office building, along with a mixed-use building up on University Station and a spec office building. Those are not going forward yet. So this residential, just being the only portion of that phase 2 to go forward, is going to throw us out of balance.
So how can
So
it
we
go
will
forward?
not be at the,
So how can it go forward?
that was a concern for the master development plan modification. It should be a concern for the development agreement negotiations, but it's probably not a point for the planning board's denying a special permit for this. They could condition it to require some assurances for that additional commercial development. But I think that's before the Board of Selectmen in considering development agreement amendments. There might be some way that you can take that on to make sure that we are going to see that commercial development in the near term.
So they won't be able to build until we reach the agreement? I mean, they can get planning board approval for it, but.
The planning board will not issue its PDR, its Project Development Review decision. And I'd be surprised if they issued a special permit decision as well before they have a modification to your development agreement.
Yeah, under PDR, the planning board is obligated to assure that past impacts have been adequately mitigated. And one of the ways to meet that test is if there's a development agreement or an amendment of a development agreement that addresses what's necessary for mitigation.
Well, I think it's time to sit down with them.
Oh, joy.
Well, you know,
We know you'll do it. We know you'll do it, Dan.
They're,
the project has provided so many benefits to the community, but we have some points that need to be discussed and
If
negotiated.
it's continued according to the master development
Right.
plan, it will continue to benefit the town.
Right.
We just
Right.
want to
So-
make sure, we don't expect them to build a spec commercial building, and I don't think they're interested in that now. It was on the table at the time of the
Mhm.
master development plan modification, doesn't seem to be of interest anymore, and that's understandable. But we have to make sure that there's some assurance that that commercial development will balance out the new residential development.
So what would we have as an alternative? You know, you sign agreements, okay, and then they don't come forward with it. What happens then? Suppose they build the condos and then say, we're gonna do this down the road, and then decide, nah,
They don't do it.
not gonna do it. In fact, we're gonna sell that land off to somebody else.
Well, you can certainly restrict them from selling land,
Okay.
but you probably don't want to do that, because if they're doing nothing, you might as well get someone who's apt to be more active. But that's one thing you can do, is you can put a restriction on there. It's very hard to compel developers to do this.
Exactly.
I've had this conversation with other boards of selectmen. Because developers typically want to come in and do the most financeable, most profitable piece of work up front. Understandable. That may not be the piece of work that community particularly wants to see. And so the question is always, well, how can we assure that we'll get this? And I have yet to come up with a good answer.
Yeah, the answer is that there isn't
Yeah.
one, right, there isn't one.
Because they've got to get it financed, and there's got to be a market for it.
Yeah, we don't want spec buildings built that.
Yeah, well, then they won't, I
occupies.
mean, they just won't do it.
No, they won't get it financed. Okay.
Okay. Godspeed. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on to new business. Mike, I know you had sent an email out. Are we currently recruiting for the children's librarian and the accounting coordinator in the collector's office? Is this just to formalize the process we've already begun?
Yes.
Oh, just the first one, okay. Joan, you want to join us?
Just because there's no microphone in the back.
I can project. Yeah, so I think that Mike had reached out to you when we received the letter of resignation from Hannah Gavalis, who is going to become the director of the Children's Department of the Westboro Public Library. So we just really couldn't wait. It's a very busy department. So with your approval, we did post the job. Actually, it closes today. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to fill that soon. So I'm here before you just to have you take the vote on the verbal agreement that you had given us before.
I move we formally approve the posting filing of a children's librarian position at the public library.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none.
The second one is a job that we would like to post as soon as possible. Louise Pisano was a long-term employee in our collector's office. She has resigned for personal reasons, and so we would like to fill that position as soon as possible because it's going to be busy in there.
It's always
If
busy in
1,000
there.
people show up
They
looking to
run
give us
pretty
money.
Yes, oh, yes.
Well, the good news is that important phase is past.
The next busy phase is coming up, correct? Dan?
It's always
Yeah.
busy.
Yes.
Okay, I move we approve the posting of and filling of the accounting coordinator position in the tax collector's office.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I oppose none. Okay, thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Mike, the Massachusetts Municipal Association Annual Business Meeting Delegation.
Pretty standard.
Is it? Okay.
Yes. We've done it every year.
Oh, okay,
He goes to the meeting that day and he can sign for the town, so.
perfect. I don't have any.
Planning to be there, Mike?
I am.
Okay. I move we authorize the chairman to sign the voting authorization form to authorize our town administrator to vote on behalf of Westwood at the annual business meeting held on the 20th with the Mass Municipal Association.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. On to old business. So tonight we're looking to close the annual town meeting warrant for this spring's annual town meeting. My understanding is did we receive more than what's in the book?
I got one petitioner article today.
Okay.
Got one petition article today.
That's mine. I've already read it.
So how many warrant articles are there in total?
There's kind of 28.
28?
Well, yeah, 31
Yeah,
including
miscellaneous.
miscellaneous.
28 and 3 miscellaneous, 4 miscellaneous.
We're up to double E.
Okay. So for tonight's purposes, we're just closing the warrant. We don't actually discuss these tonight, do we?
Nope.
Typically? No, okay. Okay, so we have approximately 31 warrant articles for the for the spring town meeting. We want to make a motion to close the warrant?
Yes, I move we close the 2018 annual town meeting warrant, and ask that all article sponsors prepare language for the Finance and Warrant Commission's review and recommendation.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
I just want to comment, if I can, that the petition article that came in is in response to the fall article for the housing cap in our business districts, and that one failed by a close margin, but failed, and this one came back with a lower number, and I think it's great that they're putting the question forth again to the town.
Yeah, I, saw this today. I think that to bring some clarity, I'm just not sure. The number seems a little funny, but I'm curious to hear from the petitioners. But I agree. Anything? Okay. So, regular meeting minutes from November 2nd.
Okay, here we go. I move approval of the minutes from November 2nd, 2017.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Uh,
I'm sorry,
You have a
that's where I
change?
had one comment.
Okay.
If we can revisit it. Christine, at the top of page 4 on those minutes, we make reference, and Nora, you can help. We refer to the apartments, me asking how many apartments had been rented. What does the new, where you live, what is it called? What is the complex, the
It is
building
called the
called?
address.
21
321
Washington Street.
Can we just amend that to say that? Because it just says been rented in Islington Center, and it seems so kind of
I didn't know, yeah,
unspecific.
there was no.
Yeah, because there is no name for it, so.
Doesn't have a name, it's just.
I'll say
321.
at 321
So
Washington
can
Street.
I make a motion that we amend the approval?
Sure.
So I move we approve the minutes as amended to reflect reference to the address of the new apartments on Washington Street.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I move approval of the November 21st, 2017 minutes.
As written. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
December 4th?
I move approval of the December 4th, 2017 minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And December 18th.
I didn't get to it.
No, only the 4th is the last day.
It was on the agenda, but it's.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, so we're
Sorry.
done there. That's okay. Any other business that may come before the board? Public or press? Any questions? Okay, our next meeting will be on Tuesday, January 30th at 7:30 PM in the EOC training room here at the police station. We are moving to Tuesday the 30th because the 29th is the Westwood Community Chest event at Kiara. Hope to see everybody there. At this point, the board will be going into executive session to discuss two issues. One issue related to collective bargaining agreements with the public safety personnel, and one issue related to the potential sale of real property, both of which would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governing body if discussion were an open session. The board will not be returning to open session.
I move we go into executive session for the aforementioned reasons.
Second?
Mr. Walsh?
Aye.
Mrs. Hyde?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you.